Okay. Just so everybody knows, hello, hi there. We're waiting for Brandon to show up. We'll give him a couple more minutes. So, hang in there.
Are you on your way in for the meeting?
Okay. Okay. I'm going to call to order a City Council May 19th work session, and I'm going to ask that we add Ashley's discussion draft as the first item, and then we'll move on to the rest of the agenda. So I have an approval of the agenda thus modified.
So moved.
All in favor? Yes. Okay, Ashley, go ahead.
Sam, I'm sorry, Ashley, before you start, Sam, could we also add the item for the follow-up discussion on the shingles, et cetera?
We do that
Just for information last night.
The order?
We probably could, I just, because you're gonna be taking an action recommending we move something forward to DRB. I'd be better if it was part of the meeting, but we could do it under good of the order.
I'm comfortable with going good of the order just because we pretty much agreed on what we were doing. It's just a little bit of different.
That's just additional information. Yeah.
Before you jump into this, just to let everybody know, we usually have a public comment, but there was nobody signed up for public comment, so we're not going to have any public comment. Ashley.
Okay. Ashley Driscoll, City Attorney's Office. So I was at the City Council meeting last night, and one of the things that we talked about is preparing a discussion draft ordinance of what a prepared food and beverage tax would look like to be able to help you in your discussions with the public. So as we talked about last night, that this is really just a start of the discussion to highlight some of the decisions that we would need to make in implementing. So as I alluded to last night, I did not reinvent the wheel. I took a look at the two cities that have a food and beverage tax already implemented in Oregon, Ashland and Yachats. And then I looked at the one under consideration in Madras, and they had also not reinvented the wheel. All three ordinances are extremely similar. I do have some questions about, what's included and what's excluded and why some of those decisions were made. So I have some calls into those cities to just get a little bit more information, anticipating some questions from you folks on that. I did do a complete ordinance, which means that I included a rate of the tax of 5%. The reason why I chose 5% is because that's what the other three jurisdictions have done. And again, it's just a placeholder. And also I wanted to note, we talked about this last night. As you can see from the draft ordinance, the tax is on the purchaser of food. It is not on the restaurants. It is set up almost exactly like your transient room tax, where it is a tax on the user, the renter, or the purchaser of food. And it's the business's responsibility to implement that tax, so collect and remit that tax on behalf of the city. So in the ordinance, restaurants, which are the primary entity that's going to be collecting and remitting the tax, are referred to as operators, and they collect the tax on behalf of the city and then remit it to the city on a quarterly basis. Again, that's exactly how you do your transient room tax. And then they become what I would refer to as a tax trustee for the city. So they collect this tax on a daily basis, but they only submit it to the city on a quarterly basis. And so there are some obligations that come with being a tax trustee in terms of records keeping, and then you have to file a tax return with the city. So to compensate operators for collecting and remitting the tax, again, all three of those other cities included an administrative fee of 5% of the tax collected. And again, I believe that's exactly what you do with your transient room tax. It's a 5% admin fee. One of the things I noticed when I was putting this together today is that I would like to have a conversation with Lori, because some of the administrative procedures, which I refer to as what I'm calling section 330.50 to 330.140. Those are, what's the penalty for a late tax? How do you file? What are we going to do about, violations? I would really like to take some time with Lori and align that with how we do our transient room tax, just to make sure, they're filing on the same basis. We can use a lot of the same systems and forms. So I decided to include that information in here so you knew what a complete ordinance would look like. But I wanted to note that a lot of those details, I will want to sit down with Lori and talk about what works best for Cannon Beach, not just taking an ordinance from another city. So one change I did make, and I think we have talked about this in the past, and we'll definitely be talking about this in the future. The tax that is proposed here is a tax on food and not beverages. So carving out beverages, and I talked to Bruce about that today, about what sort of impact would that have on the revenue. Most beverages that are high income, high revenue driving are alcoholic beverages. Those are already excluded under Oregon law. So this would just be a carve out for coffee, juice, soda, et cetera. So that's one of the big differences between the other ordinances and this one. So any questions for me at this point?
Well, for one, I'm gonna need some time to digest this, but clearly the tax imposed and tax exemption sections are gonna be the ones that get the most. I guess there's just some challenges that we have to address between those things that are obviously to-go food, like an ice cream cone or something like that. But there's also a way for the same item to be sold to go home and eat on the premises kind of thing. So that's going to be a real challenging definition area. The other area I'm really curious about is the catering aspect.
It's the what?
Catering.
Oh, cater.
How the line K, the last one on the cap on it at some point, but it really doesn't jive with the nonprofit tax exempt area. I guess I'm thinking about some very specific instances that could. Again, I need to.
So I also can get you some information. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I can get you some information about why that was put in there. So yeah, I understand that this came to you late. It's just a discussion draft. I'll be back next week. But it's to give you an idea or give you a better way to have the conversation with people in the community. What would it look like? How would it be implemented?
Well, anybody else has anything specific?
Will this draft be on our website?
No. Now, if you ask us to put it on the website, you can. I guess, Jim, we could put it on now. It's just been handed out, but as part of the agenda materials for this meeting.
I can put it as supporting documents because it did.
Yeah, so we can put it on.
I wonder if we wouldn't be better letting Ashley go through it once with Lori, more in line with how we would actually administer it before we publish it.
I talked to Lori about that today. She is in the middle of budget season. And so I will do that with her, but I may not get her time. When I said a couple days, she stopped nodding her head. I was like, let's sit down and talk about it within the next few days, and her head just stopped nodding. So
It'll happen. We'll make it happen.
yeah, as soon as I can get some time with her, I will. But that was one of the obstacles. But you can try for.
Clearly marked draft for discussion only, so I don't see it as a big issue. If we know there are things that are going to change in the draft.
And I included it, so it's a one PDF, so you have to have my cover sheet on it, which specifically says that those provisions will be tweaked. But generally speaking, a lot of the amounts of the penalties are the same as what you do with the transient lodging. It is very, very similar to what you do. I just want to make sure all the language, I don't see any huge changes. It's more just the details.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
With regards to the question about is, this draft on the website, my recommendation is we put it on the website. We do our best to get as much information out there so everybody has it. And even though this is, brand new to you, I think that it's kind of a slippery slope if we say, well, we won't do this one. So I think that we should stay as consistent as we can with it. We can have Ashley mark it and say, in bigger letters for discussion only. But I think that if we're talking about it at a meeting, if it's been presented to you for a meeting agenda material, that we should just go ahead and include it with all the caveats you want.
Okay.
Will it be appropriate if we send you questions on things
Yes, individually, definitely.
and you can answer them next week?
I can answer them next week. That would work.
Should we send them directly to you or through Bruce?
You can send them to me. And I can actually send you an email tonight, which has the other ordinances on it too, if you wanted to take a look.
If you copy me with your questions or Jen so that we know what questions are coming when we do the agenda, that'd be appreciated.
Probably gonna get 5 questions, all the same reworded.
I'll take that risk.
Yeah. Okay, then.
Okay. I'm gonna head off and if no other questions.
Thank you for doing this, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can't so quickly.
I hope it helps.
Great. No, thank you.
You were posting it as is, or do you want me to have more draft added to it?
It says discussion draft at the top and then has a watermark draft.
Are we good with as it is?
What we saw.
Yeah. Okay, I'll post it tomorrow morning or tonight when we get done.
Yeah, each page says draft in
Yeah.
addition to the cover letter.
Yeah.
And reinforce that next week and just
Mhm.
explain what we're doing.
Have a good meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next item, the item. New York City Hall Police Department. New City Hall Police Department. Can't read this thing.
Might bigger font next time.
This gizmo keeps getting smaller. First, you want to kick it off?
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Council, let me see. I wanted to talk more about options for citing. And the mayor put out a document which we forwarded. And subsequent to that, the council president, Benefield, presented some other options. And so you have those before you. They've all been transmitted to you. I've also, as part of the staff report, put a series of comments that the staff feels are important when we're talking about citing, what's separated, what's not, those kind of things. And I would ask that you give them serious consideration with your, with wherever you end up with your deliberations. That is the sum total of our collective wisdom regarding these sort of operations. All I have, sir.
Okay. I think I was hoping for just a nice open conversation about all of the pertinent and new, it's not new information because we've been through this a lot, but there are new circumstances. And obviously saw my list, and I think that is now complemented by Mike's list. And I think we should look at them in conjunction. I was as I was writing mine up, my intent was to go and just kind of describe possibilities that I saw. In that process, it came up with a bunch of questions about preference and concerns. I did kind of the same thing in his summary portion of his thing. So I think we kind of did the same idea. Obviously, with different intent, different concepts. But that's where I would start is like what we did last time, we kind of need a set of criteria to work from for choosing sites. But I think this time we need to keep it open and have it a discussion. We'll go beyond that.
Could there be maps with elevations for each to show what the tsunami impacts might be?
Yeah,
I tried to find it on the website for the city and I couldn't.
There is an elevation thing. Mike, if I can have that copy there of the NRG report.
The Dogami has a very good map on it with the range of elevations and
Is there a
section. And
those
Dogami,
I mean, not in here, but
I think it's Dogami.
it's the general.
Also on GIS,
Right, they do, but the city doesn't have one.
well, GIS, this from the city's website, has a elevation on the elevation in 2-foot contours for each of these properties. That's where these numbers have come
But it'd be
from.
nice to have it with,
Yeah, we can do
included
it.
with these so that people wouldn't have to go to
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
effort.
In the future, we'll present any information that you would like on anything. We'll try to pull it up now, Robin.
Okay.
That'd be good because I had to manually go back and look at that, make sure.
In this document, when we looked at the options, it doesn't give specific elevations like 44 feet, 94 feet or whatever. But in each one, it does say what level of tsunami.
Yeah, that's what I remember too.
Yeah, let me see. The east, Gower East, the entire structure is below the median Dagami line.
What does that mean? How many feet?
I don't know the feet.
Because
the
we're
foot.
looking at 80 feet before you're out of.
Yeah, but that's different
And
in
if-
different parts of the city. It's not always the
I
same
understand
elevation.
that.
I'd say it's probably about 30 feet.
Well, they have wonderful maps where you can actually
Yeah.
see.
And these, yeah, and somebody that knew what those elevations were for medium, high, all that kind of stuff, that was under consideration. We'll try to go ahead and pull up what you're talking about. I can tell you from a relative standpoint, this one was the least desirable from a tsunami standpoint. The RV park was, I think, in the 45 to 50 range. Spruce was also in the 45 to 50 range. And I think that South Wind, Sam, do you remember? I think it was like in the 80 to 100 range.
Yeah, it's above the high line.
Yeah, so those were the relative numbers.
Well, and in Spruce, there is a certain area that is out, but otherwise there are a lot of places where it isn't.
And I understand right now y'all aren't considering spruce. I was just saying that with the elevations, that was why that one worked, because it was about the same as the RV park. But we can try to get that other information. This one clearly stays in. And the elevation for the RV park. Let me see.
Bruce.
Mhm.
Jeff had done a presentation.
Oh, yeah, he did. Yeah, that's great. The information you're looking for, I think.
So that shows the zoning and the elevation.
Yeah, it was a Jeff PowerPoint. I asked him a question and I get a PowerPoint.
So that one's Gower Street. It says it's 28.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for, right, Rob?
28 feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Spruce was 45. RV park was 45. And south one was 100. And then he also has the zones and what they were listed on those sites too.
And I think that there was a 6, and I think, what did it say for this location? 25?
28, I think it said.
28. Either that's 20 and this is 28, or that's 28 and the back is 36. But there was like an 8-foot difference between east and west.
I remember the 8-foot because of that, just that step from the one parking lot to the X.
Right, yeah, but there was 8 foot between the front and back. Thank you.
That's, I just want to inject a little bit that height is a distinction, but it's not the only concern in a major disaster situation. And since we talk about major disaster, we always think about tsunami because that is the one that is the worst possible here. But you're also thinking about what will happen in the surrounding area for various timelines. The immediate timeline could be very secluded for this site because, even if you, I'm going back, I actually, when I was looking through my box of stuff from what we've talked about, down in the bottom was all the old TEB discussion. And when we were talking about this site for the TEB, which was a massive structure that went up the second story and then a roof escape area. One of the big concerns was, yes, we could probably save some people, but they'd be stuck there for quite a while because of the debris and the concern for secondary waves and stuff. That's another issue that just needs to be added into the mix.
Well, like the cars that will become projectiles, really.
Yeah.
And if I could just, what it's worth, one more my thought on it. I think we're more likely to face an earthquake that would damage the city, that may not have a tsunami. I think that the likelihood of having both of them, that's like winning the lottery. But so we might get a distant tsunami, maybe not, but I think a local earthquake is
They go together.
Yeah, they go together.
They go
well, not
together, they aren't separate.
well, they can be separate. It depends where the earthquake is. If the earthquake starts someplace east of us, it's not necessarily going to generate a tsunami.
We have another earthquake in St. Paul. We'll feel it. If it's a 9.2 in St. Paul, we're in trouble, but it won't be a tsunami.
I think that when we think about the, what's the name of the fault out there?
Cascadia.
Cascadia will generate a tsunami, but there's other locations that are more likely just to be earthquakes without a tsunami. So I just think,
Landslide.
yeah.
And I think every discussion about a disaster like that always jumps to the tsunami conclusion. But there are so many other things that could happen that you just make sure you think about those too.
Well, wildfire is another one.
Wildfire,
Just started to talk about.
yeah, we can go on and on for those, but I think it's more of how we address the scenarios, because one of them's different, and then there's always a few that we never even thought of.
And if I could apologize for the ants,
Yeah,
we will get rid, we are gonna take care of that, but just all of a sudden, a bunch of them showed up, so we noticed it today, so I apologize in
I
advance.
just smashed a couple here.
Yeah,
Because we didn't get a good freeze.
Yeah.
yeah, true, they kind of focused right here.
Did you leave a sandwich over there?
Are they all wearing their masks?
No, but I got it. But I
That's it.
every time.
He's trying to make.
Somehow I
Bad.
Somehow I have guilt, I'm not sure. But they're not pleasant, so.
Again, we're back to a situation where we can bop around topics all night long. It would be nice to start just with a few that are easy to kind of understand. And I would like to just, I'm going to go to my list, my bullet point list of my questions. And my first question is, does this create a better police facility? That's our goal. That's one of our primary goals currently, because that's really a hot topic. And I don't see how anybody could really disagree with that, but I want to know if there's anybody that does. So I guess I want to just cut that off the list, because we know that's a true.
It's a driver.
Yeah, it's a driver. It's much so-
Anything would be better.
That was my first thought when I saw it.
Well, when I started this, I wrote down the assets as Gower Street, Aubrey Park, South End, and the needs is police station, city hall, EOC, potential housing, and potential academy. The two potentials being potential, but the police station first, because that's where we're at right now. Because I think 2 years ago, when we were talking about the same topic, it wasn't as much the police station as much as the entire city hall. So,
Well, I guess on that point, I'd say I feel like City Hall is not as bad as the police department, but it's so bad that we need to replace it. And my view is that I think overall it makes sense to keep them together like they operate now together. So I know I'd suggested maybe you could separate them out as just an option to look at, but my personal feeling is that it makes a lot of sense, especially when you go into emergency operations, to have those two together. Certainly, many police stations are separate from the city halls, we see it all over. But my feeling is more synergy, especially in the time of emergency, to have them together. And I'm not comfortable saying we'll just do a police department and we'll continue to service the community out of this building, which is very vulnerable to the same things that police department is now.
Well, I'm curious to know what Jason and Rick think about having a separate police department from City Hall. What do you think? I mean, what would be your preference if you were a voting member of the city council?
let's take up
Yes. I think that Bruce brings up good points when he talks about the synergy between the two groups and just having that connection of being right next door. I don't know. I would hate for us to start a project and focus the attention just on the police department and then have to start all over and refocus the attention on a city hall. Because I think at that point you'd have the citizens would be worn out and done like they are, with the school being done, and having to restart a project. I fear that you would lose a lot of momentum if you had to start over and do a city hall separately. I think there's a lot of connections of us coming back and forth and working together with the other department heads, especially for the admin assistants. They're over here multiple times a day to get stuff and to communicate different things that are going on. And so I think that would be a concern, but it certainly happens in other areas where there's a separate police department. I haven't worked anywhere, well, I guess Seaside, the city hall is separated. Bless you.
Thank you.
But I don't know, without having doing it, you know, we're over here all the time and the officers will come over and check in with Public Works. That type of thing,
And code enforcement too.
meetings, that type of stuff.
Yeah, code enforcement and community development.
Well, we leave him here, he could be in Jeff's trailer. Plenty of room in there.
What about in emergencies? For instance, an earthquake or a tsunami, or it's been a major windstorm that wipes everything out for a week or so.
Those, I mean, the only thing on that end, and I'm sure Rick would agree, would just be having it in a safe area, you know, somewhere that's away, depending on what it is. Even if it's a windstorm, you don't want to be trapped somewhere. You want to be somewhere that you're away from it and can access. I do like the idea of being near the highway or having more access, but I also like the idea of being in the middle of town and accessible for people to walk up like they do now.
So you have a lot of in-house traffic and other in-city traffic, people who live here that come to the
Oh,
police
yeah,
station.
yeah, that's the majority of walk-ins, yeah.
Since I've been kind of the advocate for separating functions, one of my primary thoughts is the fact that by separating or having an additive facility, you have redundancy. So should something happen at one spot, you still have the ability to work out at the other spot. And vice versa. So having, right now, Rick has done a really good job of establishing an EOC for us up at Public Works. But it's about 1/10 the size of this room. So it wouldn't really be as good as this kind of space would be. So if we had a mirror image of this space somewhere else, we would have that redundant capability of, just having that backup. And that seemed expedient to me when I was thinking, okay, Southwind offers the high ground. Gower offers the central location. That's why I always kind of split it up between the two there. And that's why in my list, I had so many versions of ways to split it up. So I guess that's, I totally understand the idea of synergy of everybody working together. I understand that. That is a valuable tool. And that just, I don't know, that just depends on how you work together.
I'd be interested in hearing what Rick has to say about.
So it's a great question. It's probably why it hasn't been solved yet. The topography that we live in right now and the risk level that we live in this community makes it almost impossible to have your city government in a place where it's convenient for the community and then outside of all the risks. Those two things don't go together. I think the key that we have to keep in mind when we're looking at these things is, what does City Hall do and what does the police department do? And when I look at those dynamics to try to answer that question, we have to provide a safe place to operate emergencies. 90% of them can be operated out of this building, but there is a risk where we live here that it won't exist in those 10% of that type of emergency. So you have to have at least one option to be able to operate outside of this environment. And we're creating that. Is it adequate? No. But is it there? It is today. But to answer the question of what City Hall and what the police station is, they actually offer two different services. And so to try to answer that question is very, very challenging. In my opinion, if I can remove everybody out of this building safely in an emergency quickly, I don't need City Hall. I just need to get them out of here. I just need to get people away from here in a safe place that we can operate. So it's not as critical when it comes to what City Hall is to operate in a major emergency, because if we have a major emergency, City Hall is not going to be operating as usual. It's going to be operating in a whole different capacity. So it's not relative. What we're doing today, we will not be doing in a Cascadia event. Not at all. This will not be happening. So I don't have to answer that question. If we have a big Cascadia event, are we going to have council meetings? The answer is no, we're not. So it doesn't have, that doesn't have to be here, but City Hall and the police station are two different scenarios to answer. And that, I think that's why this is very difficult. And this location is extremely good for the community to come and gather. It's just the challenge is, how do you put it all together in this footprint? So no matter what, if we answered ourselves to put everything here, you really have to still have a satellite location to run an emergency operation. Is it better than it is now at Public Works? Probably. Can you improve that site? Probably. Where it is. But you don't have to overthink it. No matter what, we have to have one safe place to operate city government in an emergency outside the inundation zone. At least one location.
You could also feasibly have a situation where you have not a major emergency, but an almost major emergency, where you've got emergency operations happening while City Hall is still functioning normally.
Oh, that will be a majority of the time. We've activated the emergency operations 5 times in the past 16 months, and we operated every one of them out of this building.
But nothing happened really.
Yeah, you could have a situation.
Correct. We didn't have any, there was no infrastructure.
There was nothing happened.
That were happening and
We were observing.
we were observing.
But if we had a situation like a fire east of us, would we want, however many people it takes to manage a fire right here
Yeah,
while we're still doing city operations?
yeah, this would be
And
the
an alternate site that would then remove that from city operations somewhat, at least the confusion.
You would
I'm
only
not
have,
saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying it's possible.
you wouldn't have, like the entire force. What you would do is have an EOC function. You would have the command group from whoever's going to be representing the fire suppression. And then, contractors, if they bring in other people, whatever that's who you would put together in an EOC.
But we'd also have other facilities that we could use if we needed to.
I think it's kind of dangerous though, just to add my 2 cents in there, to build everything around the Cascadia event.
No, it's not, yeah.
That's a dangerous or very difficult and very expensive option. And it's really not as prevalent as just preparing for a majority of different emergencies in the current climate.
If we can create police station, city hall with an EOC as a category 4, which has about a 15% cost premium, then other than the maximum Cascadia, those facilities should be operating as designed immediately after the event. So that would cover, most things. If we start, I don't know, reducing standards or something so that we say we're going to do it here, then you're not going to be covered as good. You're covered as well. So. But when an EOC activates, even before an event, you bring in a lot of people you wouldn't think of, because like if you have contractors coming, a gas company, power company, anything else, they've got no place to go and they got no place where they're going to talk to each other. So they would go to an EOC, at least their management would.
I think the whole idea of having separate facilities, I'm gonna make kind of a note of that. Did I do that just for my own? Having one singular monolithic building that we kept seeing in the SRG concepts, those weren't really concepts. Those are models of what is kind of how much you would need in the one space kind of thing.
They're how big? They're how big?
Yeah, they're so I guess in my design sense, I keep breaking things up into smaller units because it's more attractive. It does not take that much away, or it does not add that much more expense because smaller units have smaller foundations and less weight. And, there are some definite expense increases for several separate buildings. But I think it makes it more of a village character. And that, we haven't even gotten anywhere near design discussions yet. But the idea of a small cluster of little home-sized buildings that are on a tiny little, around a small little courtyard is just as efficient of a working space as one solid building. So that's just one of the ideas I wanted to make sure that we understood when I'm mentioning South Wind. I'm not always seeing one big solid building up there.
I might say the same thing about Spruce Street.
That would,
That fit in a smaller building. You do add cost by breaking it down that way, but it does keep it, I think, more attractive, particularly if it's in the center of town, more attractive that way. If it's out off the highway, I don't know if that's a critical thing.
Well, no matter, even if we did do separate buildings in a village-like atmosphere on South Wind, we'd still have a lot of pilings to put down and per building.
Stabilization.
So that's something we need to remember. We still have the landslide situation there.
one thing about the landslide situation that I've put some thought into is at least a landslide situation is something we can engineer to mitigate. A tsunami, we can't. It's just too horrific. So that's another argument for not being here, or not doing anything critical here. And I guess some of my examples, all I wanted here was essentially this room and what supports this room. Because that's all you really need in the central location is the meeting space so that you can have a public meeting centrally located. I'm sure the idea of the front office, where you could have public contact with city, and have all the critical elements of City Hall separated out. That was some of my points that I was addressing. I think another aspect of this is, and this is, to me, always been high on my priority, is the academy. Whether the academy moves or not, that was why we purchased the property. The other addition to that is the potential of adding some housing into the mix, because those are goals that we've had since I started on the council, the school and the housing. We have a situation where we can create a long-term plan that starts molding all the different elements together. Yes, we'd start with one and then we move to the other. And I think that might address what Jason was saying, is if we put the focus on just a police station, does that lessen the community will as soon as we move to a city hall? I don't think it would if it's one big plan and we timeline it out to say, okay, part A happens now, part B happens a little while later, and then part C is sometime down the road. I don't know.
On the housing could help to fund
Housing could,
the rest.
yeah, it could help. I don't know how much, that's a weird question right now as far as housing. But I would think it would be very beneficial to keep that in the mix, because I think that's really what the businesses need in town, is some housing for their workforce.
I think we're dreaming to think that a developer for housing would help pay for some of the infrastructure. I've talked to two that do that, not here, but elsewhere, that are looking for essentially free land or tax-free and infrastructure, including roads, power, sewer, water, already in place. Then they can afford to put in affordable housing. So, and that makes it difficult.
Well, is there one location that we can rule out completely so that we don't have to even think about that particular location, and then maybe work our way into something else?
I think this site, we could probably do that.
Well,
The
I know
Gar
that
Street.
the site right on Hemlock, that's the
Yeah.
one I want to rule out. Make sure that we,
Yeah, I thought we'd already ruled that out a year or two ago.
Yeah, my sense is we've rolled out most everything except here, RV Park and South Wind.
Okay.
And I know Mike's always wanting to talk about Spruce Street.
Mhm.
So I'm hesitant to say ruling out one site, because I still think the separation of functions is important and could be a solution to two of the major problems: the high ground and the central location. If anything, that would be more of the question. Do we want to rule out one of those two as an important aspect? If you rule out high ground, pretty much you're just really risking the idea of someday a tsunami is going to hit. If you rule out the central location, that's more of a political decision about how do you feel about City Hall and its relationship to the community.
Well, you can't lose sight of the cost. That's paramount as we start looking at raising funds for this. And it's always bothered me that Southwind is twice as much as the next feasible site.
It is twice as much, but you're buying so much more. So that's why I don't like comparing apples to oranges. Southwind gives us a potential for housing, and it gives us a potential for the academy. Now, granted, the academy probably is less likely than it was a couple of years ago to be doing anything, but that's still an option down there that you're purchasing with that extra funding. So if you're going to compare, say, the RV park with Southwind, you just do the footprint of one building and compare it to the footprint of the other building.
okay, so I have a question. Why, I mean, if in the future, and it's probably going to be way in the future, why couldn't the academy move to Southwind even if the city hall or police station weren't there? I mean, why do they have to, why does the academy depend on having a city hall or a police station there?
Well, again, they don't, obviously. If we said, yeah, you can do what you want there, and fine, if you want to pay the bajillion dollars to get the access from ODOT, great, go for it. But what happens is when you add the other components, you spread out that expense between the components.
But we're not sure that the academy will move there.
I know that.
But basically, we'd be subsidizing it. with
Yeah, and I'm
City
not
Hall
sure the
Police
city
Department,
really should be subsidizing.
and subsidizing housing as well.
Yeah.
Another thing, when you're looking at the math, and understanding it doesn't help the academy, but the cost, if the cost premium is 16 million, and I think it's higher than that now, think that the building, the Skylark or whatever, if whatever number there was, I thought it was in the range of like 6 million. And so, you know, suppose that the delta is 18, or it is 18 million now, you could build 3 of those for that difference in the cost. And you may get somebody to build something, or you may not. But the difference in the dollars, that's, you know, potentially you get, 30 units. I'm trying to remember, is it, I don't know if anybody remembers, is it 10 units they've got there or 8?
With the Skylark,
Yeah.
I thought it was 9 million.
Okay, something like that, but that's the relative number.
I thought it was 8 units and now it's 12, but maybe they cut it back.
I don't know, Sam. It's around that.
It's 8 units. He had 6 before and they added 2 more.
That's what I thought too. It was 8.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're gonna at least be doubling the cost at Southwind, according to the estimates that we have. So that's something to consider.
Well, and I do think if we went to a local person, the cost would be a lot less. And we don't need a building this size of the one that's been proposed. It really doesn't fit Cannon Beach. It's the city, Portland, is not.
Again, if we want to talk about any of the program elements that you think should be smaller.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and that's fine. I mean, I think that's probably a good exercise. We had that with the building committee or the vetting committee. They didn't, go anywhere with that. But it has to be bigger than this because, this one is tight, especially for police. And so I don't know how much smaller you can think. And I understand when you're talking about somebody local, but the building costs are going to be what they are. The cost for materials, the cost to build roads, the cost to put foundations and those kind of things in for this. It doesn't matter if it's a local architect or somebody from someplace else, other than you might get a more experienced engineering firm or architectural firm to deal with the issues that you're going to have in a building of that size.
If we could agree on a site,
Mhm.
we could sit down and look at the size requirement. And there have been some changes. I think if HRAP is one, it's probably not as much needed as was built in there before, because they had all the arts and crafts stuff going on. There may be others. But certainly, there's no point in going through that exercise to try to fine tune the size. We don't even know where it's going to be. So,
And what happens, you've got the size that you get when you do the program, and it usually doesn't end up to be exactly that. It could be a little more, it could be a little less, depending on decisions you're made. But you really start seeing the size of the building when you get into schematic design. And we're not, anywhere near that. And so, but I'm going to talk to staff about how we might be able to reduce square footage, some in the building. So we can take a look at it, but it's not going to be, we're not going to go from 16 to 5. It'll be a smaller number. But it is possible. But I don't think that you're going to see a structure that's significantly smaller than what's there unless we try to say that, okay, well, we're not going to do this. We're not going to have as big a police station, because all the offices are smaller than what they are now. And there's just a factor in there for hallways and things like that. So that's the size of your building. And then a space like this will make a big difference on what size you want it to be. If you want it to be, bigger than this, smaller than this, however you want to do it, this space will have a significant potential reduction, but it's only going to be, maybe 200 feet or something, 200 square feet, maybe 300 at the outside.
Bruce?
Yeah.
My memory doesn't serve me well enough. How much space did you allow with SRG for this?
It was roughly the same size as this room. And it was also going to service, be wired and everything else as a EOC.
But I think it was also expandable into a larger conference.
I think that the build.
It was
bigger than this.
multifunction. Yeah, it was a little bigger than this, I think, and it was multifunction.
Yeah, but it wasn't
Like
a
Mike
lot
said.
bigger than this. It's not like, it went a long
Yeah.
ways. There was a space divider in the middle, not in the middle, but made a smaller room and a larger.
Yeah.
They essentially put the conference room at that end and just expanded.
Something like that,
Expanded
yes.
like that. I'm gonna keep repeating myself, but we can solve both of these problems. Robin's concerned about size, and you're concerned about getting square footage by dividing it up into smaller buildings. You got smaller buildings that look better, easier to build, lighter weight, less trouble putting them on a hillside, and you can actually have more square footage and a very operational system with courtyards and a really nice facility. South wind would allow terracing. Terracing would solve most of the slide problems. So you've got other design concerns or considerations than just piling and just massive buildings.
Okay.
So yes, more expensive, but cost is, to me, is one of those things that you figure out what the real preferences are. Then you apply the cost and see if you can do it. If you can't do it, then you dial it back. But you don't just battle around between different ideas and say, this one's too expensive, this one's too expensive, let's just go with the cheap one.
Sam, I understand that, but I think agreeing that the concept of being able to split up the buildings is fine. I don't think it's a decision that you make prior to deciding where you're going to be. That you're getting into schematic design at that point. So I think that, from a logic standpoint, you kind of, talk about the site, and then you, depending on the characteristics of the site, you have a different site at Southwind for the terracing things that you're talking about versus what you would have at the RV park. I think that when we talk about the slides, one thing I want to, what we found when we did the testing is that there are multiple slide points. It's not, if you go ahead and you tie it just to the top, if the second one goes, it's going with it. That's why it goes down to bedrock. So anything that you do build there, if you do tie it, and I know people said earth anchors, things like that, that just goes ahead and keeps you on this one when it goes. So we have to be able to go through and stop all of those and what's above you, so that what's above you doesn't come down, even though you're not going to build anything there. So it's not, I'm sorry, I don't sound argumentative, and I don't mean to, but I do have some understanding of these things. And so I'm just trying to point things out when we're saying, what about this? What about this? So,
One of the advantages, and I brought it up previously, and it's also in my analysis of the various options, the pros and cons. But if it's desired, well, maybe it's desirable to separate the police department, city hall, EOC. By moving police department out separate location, maybe it's Southwind, I don't know. It means that the smaller footprint remaining for just city hall is going to be less objectionable to the residents at either the RV park or Spruce Street. So it does offer maybe a degree of acceptability to the NIMBY case by separating it. Maybe an advantage. Smaller buildings, more village light. I'm not sure that the size we have can't also be made attractive like that, but just point that out. That's another possibility. And then we say, okay, what's better? We know the arguments on the RV, lost revenue. We know the arguments at Spruce Street, you lose trees. one of the reasons I'm an advocate of the Spruce Street is it's closer to downtown. During an event, earthquake, possible tsunami, it's the closest high ground for the people to get to quickly, where there are facilities and the ability to take care of them. The RV park, I don't think offers that because it's, it's just not that readily acceptable or accessible. But physically, it's just as good as the Spruce Street. It's the same elevations. It's, I say the RV park, it's really Eklund Drive. That's how you would access it. And then you put smaller buildings there. I know one resident would rather have the police department over there, because then they think or even City Hall, they think they'd get better cell service, but that's not a very good reason.
We know that there's going to be a loss of revenue if we build at the RV park, at least for the City Hall and police station together. But if we just build a police station at the RV park, do we know how much revenue there would be lost? Would it be the same amount or would it be less?
I would say from a size standpoint, it's probably going to be, it would definitely be less. It may be about half. But as I said in this report, there's also the question, you're going to have pretty much the same staffing, those kind of things. Your profitability is going to go down. The new member of the budget committee, Daryl, has offered to do that kind of an analysis that factors all those kind of things in. And so depending on where we end up, I told him, yeah, that would be great if we're going to do something at the RV park, because there's impacts other than just the loss of those particular sites, and also those are the best sites. So that was just an estimate that they had come up with.
The police station at the Elkland or RV park has a more direct access to the highway, but less access to the rest of the community. So those are trade-offs. We're there to serve the community, but I don't have an analysis for that. And everything you do doesn't mean you go to the highway. If you're going to the north end, forget the highway. You can't get there from the highway. So closer to Central City gives you more options. This location's good, I think, for police department. It gives you access every direction. And that's the reason one of the options I suggested was building a earthquake resistant building on the east parking lot, elevated, so that you keep a police station here that has access in every direction. Plus, it's been the police in and out, and the 24 hours, 7/24 is already acceptable here. Or at least, if not acceptable, at least they're used to it. So, well, again, there's no absolute clear-cut best solution. And I just can't condone spending an extra $15-16 million in infrastructure for something that we might do at some time in the future. Just having a vision doesn't get it. I just don't understand how Sam can keep pushing for that. I think it's a great vision. It would be wonderful if we had all that money and a developer wanted to come in and say, we're going to build all this because you're going to make all this acreage available for us to put in apartments, multi-family units, and all this. We don't have that. And I don't feel comfortable asking the citizens or our visitors to support that kind of funding without a definite plan and reason and rationale why we're gonna do it. It just plain does not make any sense to me. You have all these, you have these other options that are viable. They're all viable, but one of them costs twice as much as any of the others. To me, that's easy to discard that one.
To me, anything here must not be critical function. It can be a generalized function that's, that is okay if it fails in any sense. And I'm always go to Southwind because it is our highest and best option. If we're gonna find another hunk of land somewhere, and I can tell you, I've been on 2 committees that have searched for hunks of land for various reasons, and that was the only one we came up with. I could also add that every other instance in town is on a slope and it's gonna have the same problems. So there's no place where you're gonna have high ground that's not gonna have slight issues.
Well, you also have, I think every place in town has problem liquefaction too.
Yeah, so
I mean,
engineering wise, there's always gonna be some sort of effort. Southwind has the added problem of access and utilities. I understand that, and I guess my sense is we had such an incredible offer with the property. It was a heck of a buy. It now becomes an asset. How do we maximize that asset the best way we can? Yes, it's expensive. I would definitely push back on ODOT, so we don't have to make quite as expensive, but it's still going to be expensive. I understand that. But again, I'm looking at more solutions than just better City Hall Police Station. If we take that to the community and the community says, absolutely not, I'm not going to pay for this, I don't want to spend that much, fine, then we dial it back. But I take the idea that you show your client the dream and then they say, ooh, that's too much. You don't show them the most cheapest possible thing you can possibly build, unless that was their request. But see, we're in a weird situation where our population is not requesting anything specific. There's a small group that wants a school. There's a small group that wants housing. There's a small group that wants gardens. We got a ton of people that, so how can we present to them something that we think this is a heck of a neat option. What do you think? They might come back just like Mike and say, this is crazy. Fine. Then we have them involved. I'm getting tired of doing this over and over just to hire us. I'm not getting public input, but we can't get public input without something to present to them. So I'm almost getting to a point where we flip a coin and say, that's the one we're going to present.
might be the best solution.
And everybody then will come and say, oh, no, that's the stupid one. Let's go with one of these other ones. That's fine.
Actually, the work that Jeff did and gave the information on each one of the sites, I think that's a good place to start if you're talking about, locating things.
We've got to start with more because most folks can't visualize. They just say, okay, that's a site. I know what's there. I like what's there. That's what most people are going to come up with. And I don't want it changed. If I was going to present something for the RV park, get yourself an artist who can draw himself a nice visual of what the building might look like, or a couple. Now, you don't have to have one specific one. Just come up with 5 or 6 nice sketches. You don't have to have floor plans. You don't have to have all the engineering. You don't have to have all the costs. You just this is a possibility of what could happen. Then they say, oh, that's either a good idea or that's, I know because I'm a builder that's going to be expensive. Whatever. I guess that's why I keep throwing out options because I can see all the options.
Well, they kind of did that already, a drawing on the sites. You know, the potential.
When they did their pros and cons of the various sites.
That was one of the best presentations we did. I will agree with that.
Okay, the
It does
one-story
show-
and two-story options for the RV site and Gower Street site. I don't know if they did at some point they did Southwind. It's not in this particular presentation.
Yeah, that, for what they were showing us, that was the most helpful for me. It is very limited to me because I can see more variables other than the monolithic structure. But that's not what they were showing. They were showing you would fit all of this here. They weren't showing you this is a nice idea. I feel like I'm dominating the conversation here, so I'm.
Remind me again, if a city hall and or a police station is built on South Wind, what is the ODOT requirement for another lane of traffic?
There's to be, I don't know the exact specs, but there will need to be a decel lane coming to the north where cars can get out of the traffic. And I think it was a widening point so that there was also a decel lane coming from the north to the south.
Or a left turn.
You know that intersection just north of Reed and Hertig, the new one that was just put in? That might be possible. They might ask for more than that, but that to me would make sense. It's got a decel lane on the southbound, a center lane for the northbound, cut across, and then acceleration, a little extra acceleration on the south.
Do we have a cost estimate for that?
Yes, it's included in the price for Southwind.
Okay, 32 million or whatever it is.
And I don't think that's what I'm talking about. That's what they wanted.
You know, it's up to ODOT what they require. It's not up to what we want to do.
That's what they based it on, ODOT.
Well. Don't everybody talk at once.
Yeah, I've talked too much. I'm going to shut up.
I gave all my points on the handout that I gave all of this. I
Yeah.
have nothing else to add to that other than my conclusions and my pros and cons for each of the sites and the various options of splitting the building with the functions or keeping them together.
We did decide we wouldn't go to Spruce. So when I looked at this, 1, 2, and 3, just were against what we had discussed.
We hadn't decided. We haven't even presented Spruce Street as an option.
But
What?
I think the 3 of us said we weren't interested in pursuing that.
Well, I would still like to see renderings. And, you know, and a survey of trees.
If we're not gonna have enough votes for it, why waste the money?
Well, who knows, we won't have enough votes. I mean, I guess I'm open to making a decision once I see the renderings on it. I'm not thrilled with the idea, but we haven't come up with any other solution yet, so.
We always talk about transparency and making everything available to people, and yet we've, I think, somewhat arbitrarily made that decision based on long ago promises before we knew what we know today about tsunamis, and decided as a council, we're not going to show this to anybody. I think that's wrong.
Well, I guess I would counter that. How do you square that promise with the community? Just based on the argument that you've just presented, that you feel that now it's more important to put a priority on relocating a city hall versus a promise that land was put into what is essentially public trust.
Well, I guess I see open space not necessarily being a public trust. Now, I wasn't here when that was decided. And if it was decided that way, it should have been put into a truly a trust and a reserve like we have for the Forest Reserve, Cola Creek Forest Reserve. It wasn't. It is a parcel, not even a full parcel, it's just part of a parcel that was zoned open space. And I understand, I love open space. But at the time, there was no talk about the need for high ground owned by the city or emergency management. And that's not to say that's the only place we could use it. I'm just saying it meets a lot of the criteria we started off with before we got into all this detail of central to the city. For citizens access. And, I love big trees. And I would be totally against cutting down or damaging any of the big trees. I would like to look and see, can it be done without doing that? And go ahead and declare those big ones if it meets the criteria as a heritage tree. I like that idea. And make a statement about, here's what we've done, we're preserving our heritage trees. But to not even make it available for the public to be aware of it, obviously I'm outvoted. If you want to take a vote, we can do that right now and be done with it. Well, we can't do it today, but.
Let me add just one little component to that is during the tsunami evacuation building discussions, that site was proposed.
That's true.
And we were proposing to put a two-level story building on a major structure on that site. So the whole site was looked at for emergency preparedness in a major way, actually, because we had drawings on that. And I don't know where those are, but they were not best drawings. They were just computer renders. The building that was taken from here was plopped over there, so it wasn't great. But the considerations were how first, the NIMBY response was huge, just because we were even talking about it. The second was the fact that access to the emergency evacuation element of the building was a major concern because it wound up being the calculations of how many people can you fit up a stairwell in 5 minutes. It was just bizarre as far as trying to figure out how to rescue as many people as possible. Now, and the last one was once they're there, they're rescued, then what do you do with them? Because you've got 500 people sitting on top of a building and no facility to support them. That was the discussion at the time. On the other end of that, the high water line has dropped from that discussion because at that point it was about 6 feet above the ground over there when we had that redo with Dogani. And when they redid the line, that whole area decreased in its, increased in its safety. So I'm just saying, yes, that has been looked at. The one, when I read through your notes, I missed the fact that it is considered part of that neighborhood. So there is a huge adjacency to it and a lot of people that are gonna. That's not even the rest of the town who consider it a reserve. It's just that the whole East Presidential thinks that's theirs. Which, it is kind of, because it's in the area. No, I kind of always have stated that until we have absolutely considered no other possibility. And I'm confident that we need to take the other possibilities to a public vetting, which might be more confusing than what we're doing right now, but it still will be out there so we can get some input. And you never know, somebody might come up with a whole new idea we've never heard of. That's why I want some input. So.
Against my better judgment, I will offer a way to move forward.
Give it a shot.
Okay. I think that to do anything on this site does not make sense because it's one of the things we're trying to avoid and to get away from. And so I don't think that there should be any consideration to say, well, let's go spend more money and still be in the tsunami zone. This site. I think there's always a danger that, and I don't know if anybody agrees with me on that, but if we think this is not a good site and then putting out that, well, we're going to put it at the RV park, I think we'll get a strong resistance. And then to go ahead and say, well, because of the public, we'll go ahead and put it back in the tsunami zone. I think that there's a higher level of responsibility with the council than, just discounting hits. So I think that I would suggest nothing for this site. I think that that leaves us with two sites. One site is significantly more expensive than the other and has other potential that the other project does not. I think that a consensus by the council is to whether or not, moving forward with developing the concept of South Wind is worth the additional funds. And if it seems like it is, then we have two sites. If that doesn't fly, then we're down to one site, and that would be the RV park. From a staff standpoint, the RV park can work. The police department, a lot of the time, they're on the road anyway, so they go ahead and they get out. It is a little bit more difficult to get to. It's going to be strongly opposed by the neighbors, but when we're down to three sites, if we don't want to build in the tsunami zone, this one's a problem. The other one has a cost, but a benefit associated with that cost. And do we want to pursue it? But if not, there really is only one other site. And like I said, from the staff standpoint, we can do it. We can make it work. There is a benefit that if it all blows up in Wazula, and we still have a public works yard, we got that space to work with. There are some benefits to that. I think that to Sam's point, that we have, there are ways to do a really nice job in that location. And frankly, what we did is we said, this height's 45 feet above, let's go there. Well, that's also the most desirable lots. And so if we were to do a real rethinking of the RV park, it's possible that we could try to take space that is not as valuable, would not be as, you can't have it. So everybody feels like they're going to the police station to get to their RV zone, something. But there is land, especially on the west side of where the building is, that, could potentially be considered for some of those functions, some of our functions. I don't know what. But a good designer could go ahead and probably come up with something in there and make it the best that it could be. And it may be, make it in smaller buildings or something like Sam's talking about. I don't know what, because we really haven't looked at it. But I don't see this site. It's your call on whether or not we're going to try to do additional things at Southwind. There are clearly some benefits with that. An RV park works, but there's really nothing else. Something else that I would suggest is that, and this was a conversation I had with Sam, and he came up with this. Think, that's 2 or 3 steps. Think about the 4th step. If we were to vacate this site, this is a site that could potentially be for commercial. It could potentially be for, we deal with somebody, I think that it was Mike said, they want utilities, they want streets already there, that kind of stuff, and then they'll come in and build affordable housing. Well, we could probably put 2 or 3 of the skylarks across here. So you have another potential for this site if you move off of it. I don't know if you're going to put affordable housing in front of the police station. So it's just a way to move forward. And, I wish that we had more sites, but I think that these are the cards that were dealt, and I don't know how many more machinations is going to go ahead and make it better.
I appreciate your comments on that. A year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, I had said that even though my preference is Spruce Street, and I find it hard to even imagine Southland, I would accept the RV park location with a more detailed look, see if there's a way to minimize the revenue loss. And but at the time, none of you said, "Oh, well, I'll go with that." It just died right there. Maybe it's going to die right there again. But I don't think it's the best site, but it is high, has access. It's just not centrally located. Give up on that. If we can move this forward and agree to put it on the RV site, the high ground, then I think the city would be well served. Would be moving ahead instead of sitting here and going through this same round over and over. And if you guys want to go with Southwind, go for it. But
Mike, that's a really good point. I flip about it. I mean, I'd consider it the best worst site, but it's a choice nonetheless, and it's available. And I've been sitting here all night. I ranked every single one of these points, and it didn't come up the highest, but it didn't come up the lowest either.
Are you talking about the RV park?
Yes.
I mean, I look at it as a compromise.
Absolutely.
Somewhere
Yeah, that's-
middle ground. And nothing changed in this last year and a half. I'm still willing to say, okay, if that works for most of the people, most of the time, and meets most of our objectives, then and the rest of you agreed, I'd go along with it.
I can just make another point on this side. I really see the decision that, council has to make is something that is probably going to be a 100-year decision. And no telling what's going to happen in that time. I am passionate about our responsibility that if something bad happens, there's nobody for people to look to but us. So if we put something here and we can't function, that was a bad decision. So I take that the emergency responsibility and taking care of our people so high that this site just is like, I just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
I could still see this site with a garage and storage, or the truck,
Yeah.
the vehicles that go to the beach,
Yeah.
lifeguard equipment and all of that, and space for a farmer's market.
Yeah.
But again, it has those options even to do a development because the infrastructure is already here.
Yeah, I think the exciting part is what, when Sam and I were talking, is give you a choice for like, commercial or for citing housing. There are things you could sell it. There's other opportunities if this was, wiped clean. The other thing, and there are businesses that don't need the kind of, security and building strength and that kind of stuff. So it's possible you go ahead and have something, move in here that, it makes sense for them. I don't know what that would be, but you kind of offer, if we were to offer the property, we could offer it, either way. But I think that moving from here creates another asset for us to talk about. But kind of doing half of it doesn't work. And when we put a building here and then cut the usable space in half.
I agree with that, and I agree with, Mike actually said, if the council just got rid of the idea of being centrally located. Thought about that while you were rambling on. But no, that one, I realized that we will have a facility for meetings if we need it down at the old school site. If we wanted to have a large scale, centrally located meeting for any fun reason we need, we can always move city council meeting down there. So we have that kind of facility that I was thinking about as being centrally located. So Bruce coming up with the fact that we now have pretty much got rid of this idea of Gower Street. It still is an asset whether we go to either of the other two, whereas the other two wouldn't be as much of an asset if we went with this one. So that's an interesting point. I would still like to say, and I understand the idea of not the best choice, but the worst best choice, but I like that wording, but it's cute.
Yeah, I like worst best.
No,
It's a good analogy. It's exactly what we're all, everybody's thinking that.
but my training and my upbringing is always look at the highest and best first before you look at the mediocre. And what I'm thinking now is, why don't we just make some sort of presentation that we can show folks the two options that we're tangling with, show them all the pros and cons of those two options, and get some feedback. If the feedback is dominantly one or the other, we'll know. If we're in the 50-50 range, we're back to square one, but it's a better square one than it was before, because at least we know nobody has a best choice. And then we can know.
So you're talking about the two options being the RV park in Southwind.
And I tell you, you'll get all the petitions. The NIMBYs will all say Southwind because there are no NIMBYs up there.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're going to get a fair reading that way.
But if you have public hearings like we did with the Dune discussion, we just have people actually so that we can talk to them about what they're saying rather than get a survey type response. I think at least you'll be able to read them better and you'll know who the NIMBYs are.
You have the NIMBYs on one hand, but you have the cost of developing the Southwind site on the other. So you have almost the same level of opposition for various reasons. So you
Of course, that gives us that kind of leads in and to a little bit of the previous discussion last night about the prospectors is what can we afford? If we're successful with the food and beverage tax, there's an interesting revenue stream there that is consistent.
It wouldn't, whatever revenue we bring in from the food and beverage tax would not pay, if we went to the South Wind site, it wouldn't pay for the debt service on the South Wind site.
Not
Totally, because obviously if it's twice the cost and we're looking at it, bringing in revenue to pay a $700,000 debt service, and it's really $1.4 million per year for debt service. And
I understand that.
we would still have to go to a bond measure.
But we also have maybe a housing issue here that we could sell, or maybe some housing we could add down there, which would be a pro to some folks in town. You know, I don't know how expensive it would be. That, I'm just saying, give them the information that we have right now so that we can get some input. And I know it's really hard to get input out of this community. So I don't know.
Okay, you weren't hearing me. If you want to go with the various sites to the public, I still think there's Spruce Street site that has been basically removed from the table by the council, which I think is wrong. If you're going to get public input, look at those three sites. I said that I would be willing to go with the RV park if the rest do. You're saying you're not willing to do that. You want to still look at Southwind and have the public make their decision based on cost versus what do you call it, less than perfect or the best worst. So if we're still going to go to the public for input on these sites, then show them all the sites that are feasible, not just two.
If, yeah, I would think that if anybody out there thinks the Spruce Forest Reserve is a good idea, they're going to comment on the fact, why don't you look at this one rather than these two because these two are stupid.
Well, a few people did on that Blue Ribbon Committee did raise that issue. Unfortunately, one of those is now moved out of the area, but okay, well, you don't have my support for that. You'd have my support to just move forward with a compromise on RV park. If you're not willing to do that, then I'm going to continue to insist that we look at all the sites.
Well, I would support the RV park, and I would also support the idea of talking to people about the South Wind site. I just can't bring myself to pay that kind of money for what we're doing there at the South Wind site. So I guess I would kind of land on as Brandon said, the best of the worst sites. Land on the RV park, but if others want to consider South Wind, to me, it's just not the best site for that.
I feel a fiduciary responsibility to manage the city's finances and pick a site that costs twice what the other alternatives are. I can't do that. I can't do it on the basis, well, someday we might do something with it that's really going to be wonderful. It doesn't work for me. You want to move ahead, or do you want to just keep dragging us out?
Yeah, I don't know.
A year and a half from now, I won't be here.
I won't either. So that's your item 6.
And other councils have kicked it down the road for 20 years. So that's always an option.
Well, at that point, we get back to where we started from, is the very first thing is how do we create a better police facility?
How do you what?
Create a better police facility, because that's kind of an urgency.
I think based on the conversations Jason had with his folks, if we're moving forward with the police station and city hall, then it's relatively minor. But if, what I promised is that if we're going to be another, because it's another 3 years. If it's going to be 5, then I think we do need to go ahead and do something more wholesale to take care of the problems that are just, they're not life and death, but it's just not a good workplace. So I guess in my mind, getting the police out of that location is not that much harder than going ahead and deciding the whole thing. And it makes me nervous if getting the police out makes it even harder. I mean, if we're going to get the police out, fine, but then say where we're going to put the city hall too, so we solve those problems, as opposed to having a worse problem when we get down the road. Okay, now what are we going to do with city hall? I think that the whole thing needs to be solved. I don't think that, I think we need to move forward with all deliberate speed and solve the police station problem at the same time as we solve the city hall problem. Jason, am I saying that okay for what you're?
And that's why we're here talking about it tonight, because I think we have to do it. We have to do something. The kick the can down the road option, even though we seem to be always there, is not an option.
But it's not
If any of
easy.
these we could check off, I think that was the one to check off. So we have to do something. I'm just trying to figure out since we are such at such loggerheads trying to decide on some way to go, how do we find help? I suppose the Blue Ribbon Committee is one. We could show them another question and ask them to come up with some other input. Or we could just grab the bull by the horns and go out to the public and find out if there's any energy out there at all on this whole topic. If there isn't, I don't know what to do, but.
Well, I think that, I don't think people are going to be in a hurry. Most people have never been to City Hall. Most people hope to never go to a police station. Me as the manager, you as the council, if you know that we need a facility like that, then you need to take that, you're the leaders and you were elected to make decisions. And I am one that does not agree until, we have to have everybody agree, because I don't think you ever will. This building could fall down around us, and it doesn't affect most people. You have to make decisions based on what's right for the people now and in the future.
Well, if I heard the discussion right, maybe I'm not hearing it right, but it sounds like we're sort of landing on the RV park right now. It's either, it sounds like what we've done is kind of landed on the RV park with the potential of asking the public what they think about South Wind. Am I not reading our discussion right?
Only in the fact that what we've landed on is that there's at least 3 of us that agree that the RV park would be a place to cite both the police department and the city hall. I'm not seeing the consensus about South Wind at all.
Okay, that's fine with me.
I kind of agree. I would word it a little differently in the fact that I would still show the 2 options. I would show a concession. This is the one that's best economically and feasibly. And then this one is kind of a vision for all kinds of problems solved. And just see what people say about the 2 of them. I guess that's the only place.
Fine with me. I
And then-
guess I'm easy, but that's fine with me too. I mean,
There were-
it depends on what you guys
Yeah.
think. We already know Mike.
I'm less inclined to offer Southwind for a lot of the reasons that Mike stated. And mostly for the fact that Mike's already stated this. It just seems like it's way too much money, way too much effort. And it just does not seem like a reasonable.
Why don't we just show it in the public, the various sites, the kind of work that SRG put together? Maybe clean up the pros and cons. Say the council is recommending the RV site. These are the ones we've looked at. This is what we're recommending. Here's why.
Well, there's presentations on all three sites,
Yeah.
so we have something ready to present.
Right.
And I'm okay with that.
And then they can see all of them. East First Street, okay, fine. But they'll see the others and see our recommendation and why we chose it.
We can offer a dissenting opinion.
I would,
Just trying to move this thing forward.
I understand what you're
I'm
doing,
tired.
and I'm, what I ran into was the fact that we would be offering a recommendation. I would not be offering that as a recommendation. I would be offering it as the middle ground, possible choice. But I wouldn't offer it as the recommendation, just because I don't think it is. I don't think it's the best choice.
When you're saying the middle ground, are you still considering this site as an offering to the public?
No, it's hard to be a middle when you only got two choices.
I know, that was my confusion, hence my
But
confusion,
it's,
doing the math there.
if we're, I guess that's why I'm saying, since we're down to literally two choices, why not just show the two choices? And let people come up with their own, and that way we influence discussion. We'll hear some stuff and we feel a lot of repeats and stuff like that, but at least we'll hear something. And I guess it's also important to get this information out to the public because they are thinking pretty wild ideas of what we're trying to do. So if we get some information out there, then they can convince about it. Say, why can't we do something else? Well, we talked about all the something else's. I don't know. I'm just not. I suppose if if we were to vote tonight and say it was 4-1 RV park, that was the only thing we wanted to present, I would present that. But I think that's a poor.
Well, I think it's gonna be natural that people are gonna say, well, but you were talking about Southland, you were talking about the Gower Street. Why aren't you continuing to talk about that? I think that's gonna come up during the hearings. I don't think people are unaware that we're been dealing with these locations. So I think those questions are gonna come up anyway, whether we present them as a, two options equal in stature,
I think we're remiss not to make a recommendation. What are we here for? We can't make a decision. We're going to just go to the public, say, we give up. What do you guys think? That's what, and you're going to get feedback from the noisiest, loudest one. Maybe will influence more than those that couldn't or didn't take the time to come. We're the management, we're the board of directors. And we have a responsibility to take all the information we've got and make a recommendation. We're not saying that's what we're going to do. This is going to be our recommendation. And then we get our feedback from our clients, our customers, our residents. That, boy, that's a dumb idea. Boy, we know you looked at these other things. Okay, that's feedback. But to give them, here's 3 options out here. What do you guys think? We can't decide. That's a big mistake.
I disagree because you give them a recommendation. Folks are, the only folks that are really going to speak up are the ones that are opposing it.
Sure.
You give them options, they kind of say, uh-oh, I have to pick something. There will be people that say none of the above, but then they're going to kind of say, well, I like this idea from here and this idea. They're not going to pick one. They're going to pick the ideas that are important to them. That's the information we need.
Then what do we do with that? It's a whole basket full of ideas and votes, and we're still gonna have to make a decision.
And that will give us fuel to make the decision. Right now, we seem to not be able to do that. So, and this needs time and it needs some input.
Okay, well, you're the mayor. Go ahead and do it. Ready to go. Tired.
So,
I like both of the ideas. I'd like to see choices for the public to make.
It is, it's okay with you to offer the choices. I just offered my opinion that I support, given the options that we have at this moment. And I would be willing to offer a recommendation to the public, having already done so in a public meeting. I have no problem justifying that.
I tend to feel the same way with Brandon. I think we need to offer some kind of a recommendation, and the recommendation would, for me, would be the RV park. But also with the advisory that these are the other options we looked at. This is the reason we haven't recommended those. What do you think?
And I like that idea too.
okay, I could probably accept the idea of a recommendation if it's supported with an argument, saying these are the reasons why we recommend it.
Well, Sam, same token, if we're gonna offer a recommendation, I'm happy to say, it wasn't unanimous. These are the dissenting, reasons.
Mhm. Yeah, we don't have to be unanimous in every decision we make. Yeah.
It'd be nice if we could do that, but
Yeah, my hope is always something this dramatic. We should be as consensus as possible. But I understand.
If you take that at its face value, you're still offering 2 choices.
Okay. Are you hearing what I'm hearing first? Some sort of direction? Sure.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, I think if we were to, this is my take on it, if we were to do a basic description, perhaps a layout kind of explanation of what the 2 sites are, not too detailed in that sense. And then our pros and cons, we can hassle those out at another meeting so that we have some clarity on that specific to the RV park and specific to South Wind, so that there is information out there for the 2 sites. And then we recommend the fact that we're going with the RV park, or we're leaning towards the RV park because it doesn't cost as much, it's still fairly safe, those kinds of things.
Okay. To get this moving, if it's all right for a starting point, if we can use the pros and cons we already have for the RV park, and then the pros and cons that we have for Southwind, and then I suggest that the mayor write something for council's consideration about what could happen if we made the investment at Southwind. And so that, people have that. You may not agree, but it's just something that, there is this dream, and so this is something that could happen, and please comment on it. We could do that. I don't want to get into it a whole lot tonight, but have done for things like referendums, something on the website where somebody kind of talks through some of these issues. And then anybody can view it anytime. And then when you have this public discussion, it's about, what do you think about, either what we've written or what you've seen on this CD, and I have a copy of it if anybody wants to look at how it worked out. But that way, when people get together, they kind of have heard what you said, and then maybe you're reacting to it as opposed to reacting to the first time they've heard it. So it's just a suggestion.
On the pros and cons that are already there that SRG did, I think they're very limited. I think if you looked at what Sam and I have put together, you'd have a more complete.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just saying as a starting point. Yeah.
But use that and see if they need to be strengthened.
Right. Why don't we add those? And then to the degree that staff says, why, yeah, that looks like that is one. And then bring it, and then council can say, well, I don't think that one's relevant, or you forgot to put this one in, so that y'all agree on what the pluses and the minuses are.
Okay. Well, we can do that. That makes sense. I like the idea of doing a presentation people can look at any time.
Yeah, then another time we could talk about the format of when we have those discussions,
Okay.
If I could just bring up one point, because you actually brought it up and we didn't, Bruce, was that you've introduced the idea of reconfiguring the RV park.
Yeah, I'm saying that to me, I'm concerned, yes, I think that it should be. Sam had mentioned something, there's actually some land that we own kind of over there that could be a really good tent area, tent park. So I think that there are some things that we could do in association with this.
Well, so that, my point is that I'd like to see that definitely fleshed out, because to me, it makes the idea more appealing than what we had discussed in the past.
Okay, it won't be a sketch. I mean, it's
It
something that has.
doesn't have to be a sketch.
No,
For me,
yeah, but we're gonna have to do, to say that, well, we can move these here, that kind of stuff. I mean, that's like full-blown design scope.
sure.
Okay, so we would need to hire somebody to work for that.
I'm not asking for that.
Okay,
I'm just in terms of moving the discussion forward, as we're doing now, is to just keep in mind that that's something that I would like to explore.
yeah, and if we go there, I would like to explore, but I don't know if we can have it. I don't know if it's fair to try to go ahead and say, yes, this is what it's going to be, until we have somebody look at the whole thing, elevation, soils, all that kind of stuff.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so, but we can say that that is a concept, or something that we would look at.
You might give a heads up to Escape Lodging too.
Oh, sure. No, he's on. Patrick's there.
He's now become, his words, the main.
The which?
The main.
Yeah.
The what?
Offline, yeah, that's okay.
It wouldn't be hard to take the schematic that we have and just cut and paste a little bit, just to get some ideas of the space. Because what I was looking at, when Bruce and I were talking about it, there's a lot of area that's where the lodge is.
You mean office?
Yeah. the
Okay.
office. And also where the storage units are. There's a lot of area around there that's very inefficient. So if you redesigned those components in the process, there might be ways to shift a lot of the property around and gain some tent spaces or even RV spaces and making those two spaces more efficiently used. Now, granted, RVs need a lot of room, so that's a challenge, but I was just looking at it once, a long time ago, so possibility.
The storage units aren't part of it, correct?
There are,
That first,
Both sides.
the first row, right?
first row, yeah. When you look at the site
How come
plan,
I pay my rent to somebody else?
it's a
I don't know.
escape lodging, I think is one.
You could ask that. Yeah.
Pay some woman in the Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we'll have to look into who owns that.
I got a
I
letter
thought for
saying
sure
they
that was-
were recently
Acquired.
acquired.
Oh,
I know,
Do you
it's-
have one too, Mike?
yeah, but I'm in the larger units. I thought, over the so-called business park, part of it.
We don't own that.
No,
No.
but I thought we owned that first row of smaller
that's what I was thinking.
storage units, but maybe we don't own that either.
No.
That's-
I'm clicking on the county map and I just see the RV park. We own space behind the RV park and to the side of it, but the storage units all on this map, none of them are ones that we own.
No, I think it's all coasters.
Sorry, I was wrong. I've always thought that was a.
garage,
I didn't know. I thought maybe there was a third party or something.
garage doors are always open when I buy gas, so I just thought that was part of the facility, but
I think they have units there.
yeah, that may be.
That was part of the original construction of the RV park. I guess that's where I'm going back to.
Maybe.
Okay,
Okay, never mind.
Okay, Brandon, I want to make sure that we deliver what you're looking for if we can. And Sam had said, you can do some cut and paste. I'm always nervous about that.
I agree with you
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah,
I guess for me, I would say that for now, let's just keep the discussion going.
yeah,
And if the council collectively wants that information that you brought up that we don't have,
Mhm.
then we're gonna need to do it. Otherwise, we'll be locked into using the proposal that SRG presented us with.
Let's just have a recognition that there may be
yeah.
a different arrangement available that'd be more efficient and not lose as many spaces.
Okay. All right, well, let me go ahead and schedule some meetings so we can talk about that. I think we could probably get that comparison thing done by the June workshop. I could see possibly earlier in June, but I think that probably the June workshop is going to be it. Could be earlier. So we'll work towards that.
Okay.
I think it's June 8th, so it's not a long ways out.
Another 3 weeks, that's all.
Yeah, well, I know, but
Meetings.
that's how we're turning things around, and so far we're keeping up, so. But I think a lot of that information already exists. And so it's a matter of you folks vetting it once we say this is what we think.
Okay, so enough on that. Good to the order.
I just said, I'm sorry, go ahead, you're ready.
Yeah, the roof.
Roof, the materials.
Yeah, the roof materials, Karen, if you want to address the, what you found out. And while she's getting ready, I just want to say that you received a proposed ordinance tonight from Ashley. And we want to set up the meetings that we talked about, probably in the morning if we're going to have the restaurant people. So are we talking about trying to do it? I think Ashley said she could have it for the 25th. Are we trying to do it for the week of the 24th or the following week? The morning. So if it's the 25th, it'd be maybe.
Executive session and a meeting already on the 25th.
Right, but I'm saying, but that's when I think we were talking about bringing back a more fleshed out ordinance for the food and beverage. I think that it wasn't on the list before, but it's on the list now. So that was the time frame that we were talking about.
And that was actually to introduce this, which you just introduced. So now
Yeah,
we're
that's
gonna
my
be able to-
understanding. of
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Right,
So
but
what's different about how you're presenting?
we were talking about trying to get meetings as quickly as we can with the restaurateurs and things. And so I didn't know if, for example, if we meet on the 25th, are you folks okay with trying to say maybe set the meeting the 27th? Or are we more likely to say, well, let's wait 10 days and make it the week of the, whatever came before the first, but anyway, the week that has the first in it. So that would mean 10 days roughly from the time frame you talk about it on the 25th, or 2 days. So I just want to get a sense. And people will not, it's not the first time that people will see the ordinance. We will be able to distribute it through the chamber, that sort of thing. So people will have some time.
Well, as you stated earlier, you're gonna put this up right away on the website.
Yes, and then it'll be supplanted with one, once actually meets with Lori to put in the kind of things, how we collect, what our percentages are, those kind of things. So that's a really rough one based on several other locations. We'll personalize it, I think, by the 25th.
Okay. And the fact that the ordinance is so that the meeting with the restaurant people has some basis to talk about.
I think, yeah, yes, we could, it would, and that's why the morning meeting, I personally think that it's important that we throw a wider net, talk to people about what's possible, if we're able to do this. So I think we need to look probably at multiple options, but probably the first one we should do is to try to do something with the restaurateurs.
Well, and what we should do is contact the chamber. They have a list of 25 or 26 people, and I think we should contact them specifically to invite them to come.
Sure. I'm just asking for a day. I totally agree, Robin, but I'm just saying 2 days, 9 days, how much time you more comfortable with.
Well, I'd like to give them a little time. If we can notify them that we're having it, then they can make arrangements, but otherwise it's less than a week to.
The chamber has its breakfast on, wouldn't that be the 8th of June? Isn't it the second Tuesday?
I can't remember. Right now.
So
Tuesday.
that would be kind of a natural spot for them to be able to present, for us to basically take over that breakfast, if that's, possible.
Oh, yeah, if they don't have something.
Well, how have they been doing it lately?
Virtually.
Yeah, it's always by
Other
Zoom.
than Zoom meeting.
If anything, it would be a really good way to get the word out.
Mm-hmm. But that would be 2 weeks.
That's a good idea, Nancy. If they don't have something planned already.
I would like to make sure we do an invite to the restaurant people, because it's not all restaurant people that would be on the breakfast.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure we absolutely have given them the chance.
Well, Rick, you're usually on,
You're usually the speaker.
you're usually on the chamber breakfast.
Yeah.
And do you know if something else is planned for?
I'm texting Jim Panel right now to see if they have a full agenda or not.
Okay,
No,
We are thinking it's the council meeting with these folks, correct?
Yes.
Just double checking, because in the past it's been, they met with staff once, the hoteliers met with staff prior. And then also with council once, so I'm just verifying.
This one's input to you from the restaurant people.
My preference would be to meet with the restaurateurs versus, even though it seems expedient to meet with the chamber, that may not represent people that we most want to talk to.
Right.
So I'd like to reach out to them. If that's how they want to meet, I'd be happy to do it anyway.
And I would also consider not tying us ourselves into one meeting,
Oh, yeah.
just in case, because some might be able to make one day and some might not.
Sure.
Just like we did with the Dune thing, to
Yeah,
try
I
and
agree.
get some coverage here. Okay,
Can I suggest the 9th or the 10th then? So that they have some time to get themselves ready from a presentation standpoint, if they want to kind of all come in on one. Okay, and then do we want to start? Maybe we do we include the food and beverage discussion in the bulletin, which is going to be coming out the 1st roughly.
I say the more information in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
okay.
I'm very happy with that.
okay, good.
And you're talking about the 10th,
Is that Thursday?
yes,
Yeah. We'll ask for the 9th or the 10th because,
and in the morning.
yes, yeah, their preference from what I've understood has always been, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll see if we can get it later, but I don't know.
Okay. Karen,
Ready?
what you got?
Okay, last night you had asked for a couple of follow-ups on the shingles, one being the cost difference between your different options and then the warranty. So I'll go over the cost difference. The first one, the architectural shingle, which was this one, is your least expensive. And it runs about $5.85 a square foot. Based on this project, that would equate to $44,753 in just the material. That doesn't include the plywood, the membrane, anything else that's involved in putting the roof on. It's only this material. Okay. The next shingle was the presidential shingle, which is this one. And that's $6.73 a square foot. Based on this project, it would be $51,485. And then the last, of course, is your cedar shingle. And that's the most expensive. That's $14.23 a square foot. And based on this project, it's $108,860.
Wow.
108,863. And so and I can send these out to Bruce in an email so you guys have it. Based on the warranty, what they're seeing, and they said this pretty much applies across all manufacturers, that the warranties for typical architectural shingle and the designer shingles being considered are the same. And that's pretty much universal, no matter what roofing company you're dealing with.
The warranty is the same, you're saying?
Mhm.
And do we know how many years the warranty lasts?
I didn't ask that. I think on the board here, it gives you some sort of a kind of like carpet on the back. It gives you an average number of years. I mean, it's obvious based on the thickness of the shingle, one of these is going to last longer. But I think the warranty that you're actually getting from the company is the same. Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm surprised that there isn't an extreme amount of difference between the first one and the second one.
I think a reasonable difference. So,
Yeah, only about $6,000 difference.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's not much.
So which one you guys like best? I mean, it's hard to say when you just have a little small piece, but
If you're asking my opinion,
sure.
not that it matters, but I mean, I would probably go with this.
So would I.
I mean, and color wise, I kind of went with what Sam said last night. I have a difference of opinion than what ZCS had recommended. I lean towards the lighter color than the darker. I think you have so much shingle on that building that it's going to be very dark if you go for one of these darker, shingles. Especially if you got into this and went with the darker ones that they recommended. It's going to be a very dark, it's a large building. And the whole one side goes all the way down to the ground, which meets asphalt. And you have all that blackness. I think visually that's a very harsh, look, but
I think that the texture helps though.
yeah. And I think the ends of the building, you could really do a lot with that to be pleasing to what our town looks like. But the majority of it, you're going to see shingles and more shingles.
Large a mass, I think the heavier shingle is going to look much better. The others are just going to look smooth. They're not going to stand out as much as the others would, and gives it more of a
And you can get,
organic feel to the building, I think.
you can get some of the shingles that have the scallop bottoms instead of just the harsh cut.
Mhm.
You're not looking at a big difference there in price. And that gives you another architectural feel that is more pleasing than just the straight cut.
And also, when we get into design, I think the landscape architect can do a really nice job
Mhm.
breaking that up.
Well,
which we don't have now.
the bump out on this east side, actually having that background really would focus on that. So
Sure.
whatever we do with that little chunk right there in the garden just brings your focus down. So having a big mass is actually beneficial sometimes.
Yeah.
But, you know, the choice of which one is fine. I'm the heavier one, $6,000 more, is not in this kind of a project.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Yeah, the only reservation I would have with it is if a contractor offered a countering opinion, which I've heard none of, so we'd go with the presidential.
Which is the presidential?
This is what they refer to as a presidential.
Doesn't it look presidential?
No, I'm sorry. That's what I was talking about with textured because it's thicker. Yeah.
Very thick skinned.
And then are we still interested in at least getting a price from the bids on the shakes?
I think it's way too expensive.
Well, no, I'm just saying, it's just a price. I mean, it doesn't cost us anything. It'll just give us a relative number when we finally have our bids.
I guess to explain to some people why we didn't do it, it might be helpful to have that number.
On the cedar, you mean?
Yeah.
That's what the 108,000 was, is your cedar option.
But that was just for material only.
That's just material only.
Yeah, to Bruce's point, you still need to get an installation bid.
You want a quote from everything, yeah.
And Brandon, you'd be the one that would understand this. For some reason, I thought when we were having the discussion that you didn't need the plywood if you did the shake. So there's also an offset.
That's not true.
You didn't need the
I
plywood.
misunderstood it.
You did, when they made their presentation, you did not need the plywood if you went with the metal.
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Metal gives you
Yeah,
the sheer.
okay. All right.
That's what he said. The other options, you have to still have the plywood.
So that's all gonna be the same. So the difference is what Karen gave to us.
And I really agree with the architect when he said that amount of shingle, because we're gonna shingle the ends, we're gonna shingle, other parts. That's just a heck of a lot of shingling. That's why I kind of wanted to stick with this, because then you have those texture differences. I don't see any reason to even get a quote for it.
Okay, I mean, it's fine. It was just an option to see. Now, we're not looking to do anything, I think, on the ends
Not yet.
as part of this project.
Not yet.
Okay,
But we will someday.
yes.
Okay,
Here,
thanks, Sharon.
Welcome. Thank you.
Anything else you're gonna do?
Thanks, Karen.
Real quick, Mayor, I just got a heads up from Buddy Anderson. They are putting the agenda together for the chamber meeting, and they'll contact Bruce as soon as they come up with that agenda, if they can't fit the council in.
Well, which meeting is that? The 8th?
Yes,
Tell them we'd like to do a staff presentation on the food and beverage tax.
I'll have him contact you.
Okay, all right, but we would like to do that presentation, and then ultimately we'll have another group meeting. All
Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you.
right,
all.
thanks.
Thanks, Mark, for being here.